Thank you for joining the 11th Kumi Now online gathering, where we will be hearing from Defense for Children International Palestine. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping points to cover so that this session can run as smoothly as possible. This session is being broadcast live on Facebook. If you do not wish to appear, please turn off your video feed. We would also love it if you could quickly share the Facebook post on Facebook so that others may join this session. We will be muting everyone during the session except those speaking. Individuals will not be able to unmute themselves. If you would like to ask a question of the speakers, please type it into the chat box. When it comes to questions at the end of the session, we will use the questions shared in the chat. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat to message Kumi team privately, and we will try to help you with them. We hope that everyone will find this session interesting and informative. I'd like to start by having everyone you'll see today introduce themselves. We'll start with Omar.
Good evening or good morning, depending where you are. My name is Omar Harami. I work at Sabil, and I will be giving the news update from the ground here from Palestine. Thank you.
And now we'll hear from Khaled Quzmar.
Hi, morning, good evening, where are you? I'm Khaled Quzmar, the director of the DCI, Defense for Children International Palestine. And it's an honor for me to be with you in this online Kumi.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we're going to learn about Israel's long and unrelenting use of youth detention against Palestinian youth. And armed with this knowledge, we're hoping that you can help us, Kumi, that is rise up, by engaging in advocacy for Palestine around the world. So to this end, we're going to be presenting you with a Kumi Action near the end of this gathering. So please enjoy the session today, but also think about how you can engage with DCIP, Defense for Children, International Palestine, and the other organizations we work with after this gathering has ended. So it might start with doing a Kumi Action, but it might involve other forms of action as well, such as making a donation, following Defense for Children International Palestine on Facebook or Twitter. Maybe you'll buy a book to learn more or sign a petition. We're going to keep working on sharing Kumi Now far and wide, and the more people we reach, the greater the impact. So with that in mind, we're going to turn to today's session as we partner with DCIP to learn about youth detention. But first, I'm actually going to invite Omar to give us an update on what's going on the ground. So Omar, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mary Claire. If you give me a minute, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm already sharing it. Thank you, Mark. So when it comes to Palestine, there has been some developments in the country that I would like to share. As it is the tradition, we start with COVID-19. In Palestine, there has been, we're approaching 20,000 cases. Over 57% of these cases are already cured. So the numbers are not as high as compared with many parts of the world. Unfortunately, we have over 112 deaths. In Israel, the numbers are much higher. There are 85,000 cases, although even more than half are already cured. But the number of deaths is close to 620. So like the rest of the world, we're very much affected by the COVID-19. Unfortunately, although we usually stick with news in Palestine and Israel, but this time a major event happened in Lebanon, unfortunately. Last week, there was an explosion due to many reasons. It's corruption, unfortunately, or mismanagement, plenty of problems within the Lebanese government, as you are all aware. and the explosion ended up at the port in Lebanon, and it ended up with over 220 people dead as we speak, and there's over 110 people missing. Unfortunately, the numbers are expected to rise. There are thousands of people who are injured, and the whole city of Beirut is unfortunately devastated. So we ask you to hold Lebanon and Beirut in your prayers. There are a number of initiatives, mainly from young people, but others in the community trying to raise funds to help the people who are affected as much as we can. So there was also, it has been for some time, Mahmoud Nawaj'a is the, he is the head of BDS in Palestine. Just before the Muslim, he was arrested. And yesterday, Israel refused to release him. So they haven't really made charges against him. And they broke into his house, they've arrested him, and they're refusing to set him free or even to accuse him. Today there was a demonstration in front of the German embassy, the German consulate in Ramallah, German embassy, sorry, as the Germans are currently leading the European Union, trying to put pressure on the state of Israel to release him. So please hold Mahmoud Nawaj'a in your prayers. Although his engagement is in non-violence, yet this does not make him immune to Israeli violations and arrests. Unfortunately, again, Salfit, the area of Salfit continues to be under attack by Israeli bulldozers. Only today, over 120 very old olive trees have been completely uprooted. This is for the third day in a row. The reasons that are made, that are given, are not clear. They're very general, but it's we expect to make space for neighboring settlements to expand, especially the settlement of Brochin. Something happened interestingly. I found this photo very powerful. Last week, Israel, for some reason, understood that there were some cracks in the walls and in the fences and just let people walk in. People were arranging trips and so on. So tens of thousands of Palestinians visited Palestinian cities inside Israel, like Jaffa, Haifa, Akka, the Arab cities inside Israel, and it was really weird because usually for the people who know the country, they made these fences not to let people go in. But some people speculate that it is either because of the bad economical situation in Israel, maybe it is just to release the stress within the Palestinian community. There hasn't been official, Israel it is still illegal for people illegal within the Israeli law to leave the West Bank without permits, yet they're allowing it, and there's rumors of making further easing the movement even further in the coming days. So that's something that everybody is really monitoring and do not understand completely why is Israel doing this. And this photo, I found it very powerful of this young kid. Maybe it's his first time trying to cross to go out from the West Bank to go on a trip to the sea. Many of our Palestinian kids have never seen the sea, although, historical Palestine is on the Mediterranean Sea. Demonstrations in Israel continue, although, they are not related, most of them are not related to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. They are anti-Netanyahu demonstrations, and interestingly, they started to spread internationally. So they were in San Francisco, in England, in Germany, in Switzerland, Australia, Canada, and many places around the US and around the world. People are gathering around the Israeli embassy and asking that Netanyahu be either, imprisoned or so on. Although, the nature of this movement has nothing to do with the occupation or with Palestinian rights. Although some people feel optimistic when young people mainly go out into the road, into the streets. It's not really making a bigger impact on the Palestinian streets. So these are my brief sharing about what's happening in the country. And thank you.
Thank you, Omar, for those updates from the ground. We're now going to turn things over to Khaled Quzmar, General Director of DCIP. As he speaks, if questions come to you, please share them in the chat, and we will be asking your questions when we get to the question and answer period. So go ahead, Khaled.
Mary?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Good, finally.
So good to have you with us. Go ahead, take it away.
Good. Thank you again, and I will jump in the topic direct. I'm going to talk today about the child detainees issue in the Palestinian children in Israeli detention, Israeli military system. So before starting to talk about this experience, I'm going to talk about this topic not only as a director of Defense for Children International Palestine, DCIP, but also from my own experience as a defense lawyer in Israeli military courts. I used to work for about 20 years working in the military courts representing children, Palestinian children in different Israeli military courts. So during my work, I used to represent every year between 200 to 300 children in the Israeli military courts, representing them in the courts, visiting them in the detention centers, in the during the interrogation or inside the prison, and monitoring the situation of the children. So from my own experience, I can say that despite the occupied Palestinian territory is recognized as an occupied territory according to the international community, the international UN resolutions, UN Security Council resolutions, General Assembly resolutions. But until now, Israel refused to recognize it as an occupied territory, then refused to the implication of the Fourth Geneva Convention in the occupied Palestinian territory. But in the same time, while they are refusing the implication of Fourth Geneva Convention, they took from this convention in a selection way the articles that help them to put more control on the Palestinian people and to establish what called now the Israeli military system. So according to the Fourth Geneva Convention, the occupying power have the authority to establish military courts to prosecute those who are taking part in the hostilities or endangering the life of the occupation soldiers, but without changing the laws or touching the civil system, the legal system in the occupied territory. What happened in the ground that they established the military court system, and by the time the military court system confiscate most of the authorities of the civil system, and it become part of the military court mandate, such as not only those who are accusing of resisting the occupation, not only those who are participating in demonstration or throwing stones, but also they can prosecute anyone driving his car for traffic issue. They are prosecuted in the military court. If there is a conflict between a Palestinian people and man and an Israeli or a settler, the military court is applied. So by this system, it's so easy to see how the discrimination between the Palestinian and the Israelis, who are the settlers, who are living beside the Palestinian people. So the Palestinians are subject to the Israeli military jurisdiction, military court system, while the Israeli settlers are subject to the Israeli civil law, which is in accordance with the international standards. So if there is two children, one from Ramallah as a Palestinian and one from the جبعات زيت, the settlement or جبل الطويل, the settlement beside Ramallah, the Israeli settler will be prosecuted in the Israeli civil courts, which is in accordance with the international standards for juvenile justice issue. And as a Palestinian, he will be prosecuted in the Israeli military court. So the military court is working not according to the law, not according to the international law, according to military orders. These military orders published by the Israeli commander of the West Bank, the Israeli military commander. So these military orders designed for three reasons. One of them is designed to legitimate the Israeli practices against the Palestinian people, like all the soldiers' attacks, arresting, arbitrarily arresting. It's being in the Israeli military court. These military orders legitimate, and it is legal to arrest a child if any soldier or think that he is endangering the life, or he is throwing stones or do anything. He has the authority to arrest him according to military order. They can prosecute him. They can interrogate him alone without a lawyer in the middle of the night. It is legal according to military orders. Okay, it is in contradiction with the international standards for the Child Rights Convention and even with the Israeli youth law. But according to military order, it is law. It is legal. So this is one of the purpose, which is legitimating the Israeli practices of crimes against the Palestinian, and also these military orders is to punish the Palestinian. And when it comes to the children, yani if any child is accused of throwing stones, according to the military orders, if the child throws stones against something moving like a car, the maximum of the sentence will be 20 years in a prison. If he throws stones for something standing like a house or the wall or a soldier, the maximum will be 10 years. This is never happened in the world. Imprisonment period for children I can say sometimes it is impossible crime, like a child when he throws stones against the wall. What will happen to the wall? Against the tank, what will happen to the tank? If he throws stones far from the soldiers to 100 meters, what will happen? There is no danger, no damage at all. But even that, the other reason also, I believe that it is to put more and more control for the life of the Palestinian. Now, as I mentioned before, the Israeli military system covered all the aspects of the life of the Palestinians. So anything can be prosecuted, any case, any conflict can be, they can bring him to the Israeli military court system. So it's to control more and more the life of the Palestinian. Even in the time of Corona, the Israeli occupation policy of arresting children is continuous. It started from the beginning of the occupation. Hundreds, tens of thousands of Palestinian children arrested and prosecuted in the Israeli military court, which is the only state in the world arrested and prosecuted children in the military court is Israel. More than between 500 to 700 children every year arrested and prosecuted in Israeli military courts, which is the only state in the world doing that. So even during the Corona crisis, the pandemic Corona, COVID-19, still the Israeli continuous as no Corona, arresting, invading the cities of the Palestinians, arresting children, persecuted them. So, but more and more violation, like now, no family visits for the children in prison, even the adults, no lawyer visits. But in the same time, they continued prosecuting them. They continued the court. So now the lawyers can go to the court, the military court, attending the session while the child is in the other side in his prison through video. So they, as a lawyers, part of our work as a child rights organization is to document the violation against children by interviewing the children and to hear from them about what happened to them during the arrest, during the interrogation. But we cannot do that because we have no access to the children. Only we can see them, we can see the child during the court session through the video for a few minutes. So this is give you like an impression about how they are dealing with the children. They are continuing arresting and continuing prosecuting while lack of access to a lawyer, to health, to family visit, to everything. So even from the information that we managed to have from the children, there is no medical care, especially to protect them from corona pandemic inside the prisons. There is no social distance, hygiene issue. Most of their rights are violated, especially in this period. Just to mention about the Israeli Supreme Court, because the human rights organization petitioned to the Israeli Supreme Court to have like kind of isolation or the division between the children and the prisoners and the prison guards. So the Israeli Supreme Court decided that there is no division because they consider them as one family. How it come one family while the prisoners are inside the prison without leaving their rooms, while the soldiers are going home, back street, shopping, and back to be to live in the same place with the prisoners. It's unbelievable decision from decision from the Israeli Supreme Court. Now, recently, until now, there is, I think, 2 adults prisoners, Palestinian prisoners who are affected by corona. But from the children, just recently, last week, a child, 15 years old, he was arrested in the 23 of July. They test positive COVID-19, so they extend his detention and send him to a place quarantine and waiting for interrogation. So you can imagine a child in the age of 15 infected with corona, without family, without any communication with outside, with family, with anyone, and waiting for the interrogation. So the atmosphere that he is living, it is kind of punishment, it is isolation, solitary confinement, and it is torture. It is a torture. So this is in general the situation. So when we talk about the process that the children, how they face, what they are facing during this process, we start with arrest. Most of the children arrested from their own homes. About 66% from the children, according to our statistic, arrested during the night. During the night means between midnight, 12 midnight, until 3-4 a.m. So most of the children, ex-detainees that I interviewed 2 years ago, they told me that they couldn't sleep or go to sleep before 3 a.m. because usually the arrest happened in the middle of the night. So they keep waking up until 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. then go to sleep if the soldiers do not come. So when I asked them in which room you prefer to sleep, most of them, they said we like to sleep on a room with a window to the street because we don't want the soldiers to wake me up, because what happened when they arrested the children from their own house and from their houses while they are sleeping, soldiers jump in without waiting the family to open the doors, jump in, sometimes broke the door, and then entered the room of the child, and they never accept that the family, the mother or father or the brother to wake the child up. No, the children, the soldiers themselves to wake them up, and we document many cases how they were treated, tortured during even while they were sleeping. Questions, different questions without knowing who is questioning. Only soldiers with mask and with the gun, sometimes with dogs. So it's a terrible treatment. And then blindfolded and handcuffed the child in front of the family without letting him even say hi to the family, without even, sometimes we wear his clothes and the pyjama, took him direct out to the military jeep waiting outside the house. So then to go to the next step, which is transfer from the home, from the place of arrest to the interrogation center. There, the military jeep is waiting. They do not accept or let the child sit on the seats. No, sit between the two seats in the military jeep in the ground, and blindfolded and handcuffed. Then between the two soldiers, and during the way to the detention center, the child will be subject for different kind of slap, beating, bad words, kicking. So this took sometimes minutes, sometimes hours, depend, and direct to the Israeli military or interrogation center, which is based on in a settlement where is a military camp, or to the police station, and direct to the interrogation in the middle of the night, without having a lawyer, without having a family presence during the interrogation, and without even telling the child his rights to have a consultation from a lawyer or to see a lawyer, or without asking any question, even sometimes without letting him go to the bathroom, or if he asks for a drink or food, no way until after your interrogation, after you confess, we'll give you what you want. And that they use it as a kind of a pressure. So during the interrogation, they have usually they use different kind of methods of torture, like of course handcuffed and tied even in the chair, the iron chair that he's sitting in, and sometimes stay hours, 2 hours, 3 hours more or less. Using different threats to push or to force the child to give a confession, and then if he gave a confession, direct send the child from the security or from the interrogators to the police to give a confession in front of the police, to say that he was in a comfortable place, even drinking water or tea, and give. But if he changed what he said in front of the interrogators of the security, the Israeli police will let him back, send him back to the interrogator to be subject again to the trauma, to the torture or the treatment, and again to go to say what they want from him. From my own experience, many times I found that during my searching in the file and reading the testimony of the child to the police, sometimes giving a confession which is unbelievable, like a child to give a confession that he threw stones last month 300 times. How it come that he throws stones 300 times? Or sometimes give a confession that he throws stones with a friend of him, and the friend is inside the prison in that time. So just the children in their mind is how to get out from this atmosphere, from this terrible situation. So they gave such a confession, and direct the interrogator is never care about the realistic confession or not, only to obtain the confession. And then interrogating the child in the middle of the night without a lawyer, without legal consultation, is according to the military order is legal, and then they will send the file to the Israeli military court. And then the other step is the military court, and in the military court, there is no difference between children and adults. Just in theory, there is a change happened in 2010. They established what they call it juvenile military court, but there is no difference between the juvenile military court and the military court itself, because they are both of them in the same place. the juvenile court considered as a juvenile court while the child is in, but when the child get out, it become a normal military court. No special judges, no special prosecutors, juvenile prosecutors, no juvenile judges. It's still a military court, and even for the sentences and the treatment, it is the same, no different at all. Only they play in the words and they try to present it as a kind of cosmetics to the Israeli military system. But in fact, there is no changes. It is still military court, regardless called as a juvenile court or a military court. It is a military court. The military court, as I mentioned before, it's work according to the Israeli military orders, no international law there. And from my experience, sometimes I used to try to present what the Child Rights Convention talk about the children when they become in conflict with the law. Directly, the judge used to stop me and to ask me, please wake up, you are not in the Hague, you are in the military court. So military court is a special model, and it is everything is accepted when it comes to the Israeli soldiers. So the sentences in the military court depend if the child, first of all, the age of the criminal responsibility is 12 years old. So they cannot prosecute a child under the age of 12, but they can arrest, and many times happen that there's children in the age of 5, 6, 7 years, 9 years, 10 years, but they cannot prosecute them. They can keep them for hours, 2 hours, 3 hours, 10 hours, but they cannot prosecute them. But for a child in the age of 5 or 10 or 9 years old to be in prison, even for 2-3 hours, it's a disaster. And we document many cases they were affected by spending 2-3 hours with the soldiers alone without a family. So if the child in the day of the sentence, which is here in contradiction with all the international juvenile justice standards, with all the youth laws, like usually the look for the child when he commits the crime, but in the Israeli court, not in the day of committing the crime or throwing stones, no, in the day of the sentence. So if the child throws stones while he was 13 years old and arrested while he is 15 years old, then they will consider him as 15 years old, and then he will not benefit from the minimum of the sentence. So if the child in the day of the sentence under the age of 14, the maximum sentence will be 6 months in prison. But if he is more than 14, if he's 15, 16, the maximum will be open maybe 20 years or more. So most of the children are accused of guns, but usually in the Israeli military court, there is like a system called plea bargain. With that, instead of exhausting the procedures in the court, there is a way to do kind of accordance or agreement between the prosecutor and the lawyer. If the child is accused like of 10 charges of throwing stones, as a lawyer, we sometimes discuss with the prosecutor to delete, let's say, 2/3 of them and to leave 1/3, and then to sentence the child for 3-4 months or 6 months. And usually, as a lawyer, sometimes it is very difficult for us as a defense lawyer. And sometimes we feel that our hand is cuffed. We cannot do a lot because the military law is clear. Throwing stones, the maximum is 20 years. So when the Israeli military prosecutor offered to do a plea bargain and agreement to delete some of the charges and to sentence the child 6 months, direct as a lawyer, my job is to accept it and to convince the family and the child to accept it, because otherwise, if we do not accept the 6 months, I'm sure, and it happened many times, that when the family refused and the child refused, of course, as a lawyer, I cannot do something against their position. So the sentence will be double, even sometimes triple. So by being in the Israeli military court for a long time, I start feel that I'm part of the Israeli military system. Then after 20 years, I stopped being as a defense lawyer, and I took a rest and I went to continue my study. So after the sentence, the child will go to the prison. There is 3 sections, special sections for children. Section special, it means that only to separate them from adults, but nothing special for the children. One of them inside the occupied territory near Ramallah, but 2 prisons are inside Israel, which is in contradiction with the 4th Geneva Convention to transfer the prisoners from the occupied territory to the occupying state. In brief about the situation in prison, according to the law, as from my legal background, the imprisonment, the judge decision in the court is to deprive someone convicted from his life to liberty, but not touching the other rights of the prisoner. But what happened in the Israeli military system is while the child is in a prison, he is, most of his rights are violated. When you talk about right to health, there is no medical treatment inside the prison. Only there is a nurse, and usually they never care about the sick prisoners. Just to give example here, one of the children told me that when he was suffering and from the pain of his teeth, so he was crying and shouting to the soldier, the nurse come. He told him, what do you need? He said, he asked for something to Panadol or something like that. He said, I never hear that one died from the tooth pain. So you can stay with your pain. So this is how they are dealing, how they are serious when they are taking care of the life of the prisoners, of the children. When we talk about right to education, I visited the Israeli, the juvenile section for the Israeli children inside Israel. They are like in a closed school, and they have access to families, the teachers from outside coming and teach them, and they have free hours every day, and every week they have 1 day to get out. While there's a Palestinian in the same prison, but in another section deny family visits only after 3 months of arrest, and once a month for 15 minutes. So I petitioned with another Israeli lawyer to the Israeli Supreme Court for the right to education, because they said education for prisoners for security reasons are no right to have education. But the Israeli court decided that they have the same right as the Israeli, and according to the Palestinian curriculum, but in accordance with the security system in the prison. So after the decision, I took the Palestinian curriculum and I went to the Israeli prison, and I sat with the director of the prison, and I started to talk about how to implement the decision. He said, okay, but let's ask the education officer to come. The education officer come, and he said, okay, the court decide that in accordance with the security. So history is against the security, because in the history, there is nothing called Israel. Israel is established in the late 40s. So it is against the security. Religion is against the security, because in religion, they talk about jihad. Science is against the security, because from science, they can create bombing or something like this. So they limited the education to Palestinian children only for Arabic and mathematics in general. So it is useless. This is how they are dealing with the prisoners. I will stop here, and I am ready to answer more questions, focus on the questions of the audience.
Thank you so much for your very informative presentation. I think we've all learned a lot this afternoon. We have a lot of questions in the group chat. The first one I'm going to ask you is there a minimum age that children can be arrested or detained? What is the age range of children in prison?
To answer direct?
Yes.
Yes. There is no minimum age to arrest, because the soldiers have the authority to arrest anyone. And the youngest child that I noticed that he was arrested, he was 5 years old, from a village near Jenin, because their house is beside the wall, and they accused the child that he throwing stones to the wall. But they can keep the child for hours, but they cannot keep him for a night or 1 night or more, or prosecute him, only just arrest. But for the prosecution, it's the age of 12, no under 12.
Thank you. The next question I have for you are girls treated the same as boys? Do girls suffer different risks and challenges?
Yes, thank you. Girls usually face more violation against more than the children or the boys, because they knew our culture as an Arab, as a Palestinian, as a Muslim mostly. So sometimes they try to use like some threat of sexual abuse or something like this, or those who are wearing hijab, they try to focus more and more on the hijab and to take it off. So, but usually the rest of the girls is very, very few girls. Like every year, no more than 5 to 6 girls sometimes, but boys are usually more than 500, 600, 700.
Wow, thank you. The next question we have is, Israel has made promises over the years to make the system more child-friendly. Have any of these promises been implemented?
I go back to 2013 when UNICEF published the report about child detention issue and Palestinian prisoners inside Israel, and they gave them, I think, more than 40 recommendations. One of the recommendations is, instead of arresting the children in the middle of the night, to send them summons and then to see if the child is accepted to come in the morning or not. So they do it like a pilot project for 2-3 months, and then they stopped because they saw that the child sometimes come, because the Israeli policy focus more and more how to put the child from the first moment of arrest in an atmosphere that no one can help you except your cooperation with the interrogator. So they feel that with summons, and they face that the children are not that much care about the prison, so they stopped it. Other recommendation, or not recommendation, as change, is raising the age of the children. In the past, they used to consider the child, the Palestinian child, under the age of 16, not under 18 as all over the world. But they raise it to 18 without giving any privacy to the children from the age of 16 to 18. They are treating them as adults in all the process. As one of the changes is the military court. So the juvenile court, when they established it in 2010. And my answer was in that time to the media and even to the court that I'm happy that after 50 years of occupation, you confess that you used to prosecute children in military court, which is so far from the fair trial standards. But now you are going to prosecute them in a juvenile military court. So let's see what will happen in the juvenile military court. But unfortunately, we discovered that no changes, only they play by the name and the names, but without changes in the ground.
Thank you. The next question I have for you is, we don't often hear about Palestinian children in jail in the USA. Why is this the case? And what is your organization doing to educate people in the USA and around the world?
Yeah, you mean Palestinian children in Palestinian civil courts?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
We don't often hear about Palestinian children being arrested by the military courts in the USA. The media doesn't talk about it very much. So one of the questions in the chat was, do you have any idea why that's the case? And is your organization working to educate people around the world more broadly?
Yeah, as DCI, as Defense for Children in Palestine, we are care about all the rights of the children all over the world. So even in Palestine, children who are in conflict with the law and arrested by the Palestinian police, we worked hand by hand with the police. We trained them how to treat children and how to respect the international juvenile justice standards. The arrest will be the last resource and for the shortest period. I was in an advocacy tour in the US and I heard about the American US treating the children. Really, it's okay. I know that there is different charges, different reasons of arrest in the US and in Palestine, but I told my colleagues there and even when I met with the decision makers that children should be treated as victims, not as criminals. So what happened in solitary confinement and other practices in the US is illegal according to the international standards, and the same what we are saying about the solitary confinement and torture in the occupied territory from the Israeli side. And even if the Palestinian police do that, usually we go to public, we file complaints against the police who did that, and then we talk in public about these crimes.
Thank you. We have time only for one more question, so I'm just going to share the last one that was just messaged to us in the group chat. One of our participants noted that is asking if there are any studies on what happens to Palestinian children when they are 20 or 30. Is their attitude towards Israel the same after they leave Israeli prison? So I think the question's asking, has anyone studied the impact on children who are arrested and how it shapes them later in life and how it shapes their opinion of Israel after being arrested and detained as children?
Yeah, and there is some reports. There is I never see a professional study about the effects of the prison for children, but I interviewed and many psychologists talked about this issue. And from our side as DCI, since 1990s, we start to work with the children the ex-detainees, because we believe that they are children and during the process of arrest and interrogation in prison, they face trauma and they need a special treatment. So we used to have social workers to work with them. In the first, it was difficult for us to convince the family and the child, because according to our culture as a Palestinian, anyone being in prison, especially from the occupation, this means that he's an adult and he's a hero, no need for any kind of treatment. But in fact, they need, and we discovered the need through our work with them. And now there is more than 4 organizations, human rights organizations, with psychologists, with social workers, work with every child released, and one of them is YMCA. We have like a referral system between DCI and YMCA, and every child released direct will send them for special treatment. Of course, in YMCA they have reports and maybe study about that, and they have a lot of information about the effects of the prison for the children.
Thank you so much for your presentation today and your insightful responses. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time, so we're going to start wrapping up. I'd like to lead us in a prayer together. At the end of the prayer, I'll say, Lord, in your mercy, and the response is, hear our prayer. So, Lord, we pray for the work of DCIP as they strive to work against the illegal Israeli detention of children. We pray that children around the world have the freedom to live, develop, and grow without threat of detention and free from occupation. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Amen. So it's been really wonderful to gather with Khaled today and learn about Israel's use of youth detention. But we at Kumi Now believe that knowledge is just the beginning. So the reason that Kumi Now exists is to empower people like you to act on their knowledge. So with this in mind, we've created a single advocacy action that anyone can participate in. And we're also going to be posting it to the chat, and it's available on our website. So this week, we'd like you to find a location where you can be socially distanced, but still viewed by other people walking by. So maybe the edge of a park or your front lawn. And you could do this either together or with a couple of friends and hold a demonstration against youth detention. You can hold signs with pictures, quotations, and statistics about child arrests in Palestine, such as the story of Ahed Tamimi, educating passersby about this cruel reality for many Palestinian children. For visual effect, you could potentially sit on your knees or be blindfolded, and then have the rest of your group hand out leaflets about child arrests in Palestine. You can utilize the resources from DCIP's No Way to Treat a Child campaign. The link's going to be in the group chat. And that includes a full report and statistics about detention. There's also two short films you might want to watch to educate yourself. One is called Detaining Dreams, and the other is called Obaida. So I'm just going to quickly share some of the following statistics from DCIP that might be helpful for leading a demonstration. And again, all of this information will be shared in our chat box. 73% of children experienced physical violence following arrest. 95% were hand-tied. 86% were blindfolded. 49% were detained from their homes in the middle of the night. 64% faced verbal abuse, humiliation, or intimidation. 74% of children were not properly informed of their rights. 96% were interrogated without the presence of a family member. 20% were subject to stress positions. 49% signed documents in Hebrew, a language many Palestinian children don't understand. And finally, since 2000, an estimated 10,000 Palestinian children have been detained by Israeli forces from the occupied West Bank and held in Israeli military detention, in the Israeli military detention system. Finally, we'd love it if you do partake in this action, if you would take a photo of your group and post it on social media. And if you would include the hashtags No Way to Treat a Child, Kumi Now, and Kumi 43. Khaled, do you have any further thoughts on this Kumi action or any other ways that people could apply what they've learned in this session today and take action?
Yeah, and I would like to say last words that Resting Children started the first day of the occupation, and I'm sure resting will continue because it's linked to the occupation. While there is occupation, there will be a resistance, and then there will be violation and imprisonment from the Israeli side. So we believe that our work and the Sabir work and the Kumi initiative is part of our struggle in the international level to raise the voice about the crimes that are committed by the occupation, by arresting the children, and the children are paying the price of this occupation. So we believe that while the Israeli soldiers, while the Israeli militant and the criminals who are committing these crimes live under full impunity, they will continue these crimes. But when there is a accountability system in place, I'm sure there will be the start end of the occupation, start end of these crimes, because with the accountability, I'm sure there will be no more crimes against the children and the Palestinians. So we have to raise the voice wherever. I'm happy that now we have such online initiative. And it's good to have more and more to raise the voice in this issue and asking the decision makers in the United Nations or in our states, wherever, to put the pressure on Israel to abide with the international standards and to give the rights for the children and then to stop these crimes.
Thank you. Thank you so much again for your time and for joining us today. I also want to thank everyone who joined this Zoom seminar. Thanks for being patient as we navigate through technical difficulties. We really appreciate your presence and solidarity with us. Next, we're going to be getting an update about the current state of affairs in Gaza from Dr. Bassem Hamid, who's the Dean of the School of Public Health at Al-Quds University in Gaza. And we're also going to be hearing from Kyle Christofoulou of CMEP, who's going to be talking to us about Churches Against Annexation and their campaign. As I mentioned earlier in this session, there's also a ecumenical worship service happening tomorrow at 6 p.m. Wednesday, August 12th in Arabic, and there will also be an English service booklet for people to follow along. We really appreciate seeing you. We hope to see you again next week. If you've liked what you've seen today, we'd love it if you'd share this with your friends, your family, your classmates, church groups, online, and through social media. This marks the formal end of our meeting. We know you all have other things to do, so please don't feel obligated to hang around. So we're going to be saying goodbye to anyone watching on Facebook, and we're going to end the recording at this time. The recording of this session will be available on kuminow.com and on our YouTube channel starting tomorrow. And again, if you like what you saw, please consider sharing it with others. So again, and please remember that together we can rise up for Palestine.